Security, get this woman out of my boardroom before she wastes another second of my company's time. Grant Holloway's voice struck the glass walls hard enough to silence the 12 executives gathered around the long walnut table. At the far end of the room, Danielle Brooks did not flinch. She stood beside an empty chair, one hand resting on a slim black leather briefcase, her navy suit crisp, her posture straight, her expression calm enough to make Grant's anger look even louder. Outside the 38th floor windows, Chicago moved beneath a gray morning sky. Cars crawled through the streets below. The river cut between steel buildings. Inside Holloway Industries, however, nothing moved. Not the assistant near the door. Not the vice presidents with tablets in front of them. Not even the young legal analyst seated near the back wall, who had been taking notes until Grant's voice made her pen stop in midair. "Mr. Holloway," Danielle said, "I only need 5 minutes." Grant gave a short laugh. It was the kind of laugh that did not invite anyone else to join. "You need an appointment. You need authorization. And you need to understand that this floor is not a place where people walk in and demand time from the chief executive officer." Danielle looked at the conference room clock. 9:12 in the morning. She had arrived exactly when the calendar invitation said the executive meeting would begin. But Grant had never seen the invitation. He had not checked the schedule. He had not asked why the receptionist had allowed her through the private elevator. He had looked at her dark skin, her simple navy suit, and the briefcase in her hand, then decided he already knew the story. "I did not walk in to demand anything," Danielle said. "I came to deliver documents that require your attention." "Documents?" Grant repeated. "What is this, another threatened lawsuit?" A few people around the table lowered their eyes. Victor Hale, the chief operating officer, leaned back in his chair and folded his hands over his expensive tie. "Grant, perhaps legal can handle this," he said. "We have a board discussion to begin." Danielle turned slightly toward Victor. "Legal is already involved." The young analyst in the back looked up at that. Her name was Maya Thompson, and she had spent the last 2 years reading contracts most executives never bothered to understand. From where she sat, she could see the small embossed mark on Danielle's briefcase. Brooks Equity Partners. Maya had seen the logo before, buried in transaction files connected to a confidential acquisition rumor. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. "Not yet. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we are glad you are here." Now back to Danielle Brooks. Grant stepped closer to the table, his face tightening as he looked at Danielle. "You are interrupting a private executive meeting. I do not care who you represent. You need to leave." Danielle placed her briefcase on the polished wood and clicked it open. Inside were neatly arranged documents, a fountain pen, and a sealed envelope marked confidential. "Read the final page," she said. Grant did not even glance down. "I said leave. It will take less than a minute. Security is on the way." The assistant near the door shifted uneasily. Maya's fingers closed around her pen. Victor smiled as if the outcome had already been decided. Danielle closed the briefcase again, slowly and carefully. Then she looked directly at Grant Holloway. "You are making a very expensive decision," she said. Grant's expression hardened. "This is my company." Danielle held his gaze. "That is what you think." Grant Holloway stared at Danielle for a moment, then laughed again, louder this time. "You have confidence," he said. "I will give you that." He walked to the head of the table and placed both hands on the polished wood, reclaiming the room with a gesture he had used for years. "But confidence does not give you permission to disrupt a board meeting." Danielle remained beside the empty chair. "Neither does authority give you permission to decide who belongs in a room before you know why they are here." The statement was quiet. It was not dramatic. But it changed the air. Victor Hale shifted in his seat and glanced toward the other executives. A few of them looked uncomfortable, though none spoke. Grant's smile disappeared. Do not turn this into something it is not, he said. You arrived without an appointment, carrying documents nobody requested. Danielle looked toward the assistant near the door. Could you please confirm whether my name was on the visitor list? The assistant, a young woman named Erin Wallace, froze. Her tablet was held against her chest. She had seen Danielle's name on the list that morning. She had personally received the instruction to send her to the executive floor at 9 o'clock. But Grant was watching her now. I do not know, Erin said softly. Danielle nodded once. You do know. But I understand why you do not want to say it. Grant turned sharply toward Erin. Was she on the list? Erin's face reddened. Yes, sir, she said. Danielle Brooks was cleared for the boardroom. A hush passed through the room. Grant looked back at Danielle, irritated but not concerned. Cleared by whom? The corporate secretary's office, Erin said. Victor leaned forward. That is impossible. The corporate secretary would have informed us. Maya Thompson looked down at the tablet in front of her. She had been searching the internal calendar while everyone argued. There it was, hidden beneath the confidential meeting designation. Closing notice. 9:15. Attendees, board members, corporate secretary, outside counsel, and Brooks Equity Partners. Her heart began to race. She looked at Danielle again, at the briefcase, at the sealed envelope. Then she looked at Grant. He had not opened the agenda. He had not read the meeting notice. He had simply decided Danielle was an interruption. Mr. Holloway, Maya said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Grant did not look at her. Not now, Maya. But the meeting calendar. Victor cut her off. Maya, please do not insert yourself into an executive matter you do not understand. The words made her go silent. Danielle watched the young analyst lower her eyes. Something in Danielle's expression softened, though her posture did not change. She knew that silence. She knew what it felt like to be told that facts did not matter because the wrong person had spoken them. Grant tapped his watch. Security should be here any moment. I suggest you take your documents and leave with some dignity. Danielle glanced at the clock. 9:14. I have no intention of losing my dignity, she said. That is not the risk in this room. The elevator doors opened in the hallway outside. 2 building security officers appeared at the glass entrance, waiting for instructions. Grant pointed toward Danielle. Escort her out. One officer stepped inside, but Danielle raised one hand, not to stop him, only to ask for a moment. Before anyone moves, she said, please ask Mr. Holloway to open the envelope on the table. Grant looked at the sealed envelope as if it offended him. Why would I do that? Danielle's eyes stayed on his. Because in 60 seconds everyone in this room will receive the same information. Grant Holloway looked at the envelope, then at Danielle, as if the paper itself had challenged him. You are not in a position to give me instructions, he said. Danielle did not move. Then do not open it. That answer unsettled him more than an argument would have. The 2 security officers remained near the door, waiting for a clear command that suddenly did not seem so clear. Erin Wallace stood beside them with her tablet pressed against her chest. Victor Hale leaned toward Grant and spoke under his breath, but Danielle could still hear the edge in his voice. This is a performance. Let security handle it. Maya Thompson looked from the sealed envelope to the clock. 9:14 and 30 seconds. Her pulse beat faster. She had seen the confidential calendar entry. She had seen the name of the law firm. She had seen Brooks Equity Partners listed beside the corporate secretary and outside counsel. But she was only a legal analyst, 20 years old, 2 years into her career, and every lesson she had learned at Holloway Industries told her that speaking at the wrong time could cost her everything. Grant pointed toward the door. Ma'am, you have had your chance. Leave now. Danielle placed her fingertips on the closed briefcase. I asked for 5 minutes. You chose to spend them proving why this company needs a different kind of leadership. Grant's face tightened. What exactly are you accusing this company of? I am not accusing anyone, Danielle said. I am observing what has happened in front of witnesses. Victor gave a dismissive smile. You came here looking for a confrontation. Danielle turned toward him. No. I came here for a closing meeting. The word closing hung in the room. Maya's eyes widened. One of the board members, an older man named Leonard Price, reached for the envelope. Grant placed his hand over it first. Nobody touches anything until I know what this is. Danielle watched him with steady patience. That is wise. You should have started there. At 9:15 exactly, every phone around the table vibrated at once. The sound was small, but it cut through the room with startling force. One executive looked down first. Then another. Victor checked his screen and went still. Aaron's tablet lit up with a corporate notice. The security officers glanced at each other, uncertain whether they were supposed to remain. Grant pulled his phone from his pocket, irritation already rising in his face. Then he read the first line. His expression changed. It did not happen all at once. First confusion. Then disbelief. Then the slow, unmistakable loss of certainty. The notice came from the corporate secretary's office, copied to every board member, executive officer, lender, and senior legal representative. It confirmed that Brooks Equity Partners had completed the acquisition of 51% of Holloway Industries voting shares that morning. It confirmed that Danielle Brooks had been appointed chairwoman of the board, effective immediately. It confirmed that all executive authority was subject to review pending the first board session under new ownership. No one spoke. The city outside the glass walls continued moving, unaware that a company had changed hands while its chief executive officer was still trying to have its new chairwoman removed from the room. Grant looked up from his phone. This cannot be right. Danielle opened the briefcase and removed the sealed envelope. It is right, she said. And it has been right since 8:47 this morning. Victor's face had gone pale. Leonard Price stared at his own screen, then at Danielle. You bought the company, he said. Danielle met his eyes. My firm acquired controlling voting interest. This morning. Grant took one step back from the table. You cannot do this without my approval. Danielle's voice remained even. You did not need my approval to judge me before you knew me. But you will need mine to keep leading this company. Grant Holloway stood frozen beside the table, his phone still glowing in his hand. The message on the screen had not changed. Brooks Equity Partners had acquired 51% of Holloway Industries voting shares. Danielle Brooks had been appointed chairwoman. Executive authority was subject to immediate review. Yet Grant kept reading it as if another version might appear if he stared long enough. Victor Hale looked toward the security officers at the door. You can go, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Neither officer moved. They looked at Danielle instead. She gave them a small nod. Thank you for waiting, she said. There is no need for anyone to be escorted out. The officers stepped back into the hallway, closing the glass door quietly behind them. Grant watched them leave, and for the first time that morning, he looked like a man who understood that the room no longer belonged to him. Danielle walked to the empty chair at the head of the table. She did not sit down yet. She placed the sealed envelope in front of Grant, then opened it herself and removed the closing documents. The transaction was completed at 8:47 this morning, she said. The board was notified according to the terms of the agreement. The corporate secretary confirmed the meeting at 9:15. Every required notice was delivered. Leonard Price adjusted his glasses and read the documents on his tablet. The signatures are valid, he said quietly. The lenders approved the transfer. The voting rights are effective. Victor looked at Grant. There must be a way to challenge this. Danielle turned toward him. You are welcome to ask counsel about the agreement. But there is no confusion about what happened. Maya Thompson sat near the back wall, still holding her pen. She had expected anger from Danielle. She had expected the new chairwoman to use the moment to embarrass everyone who had doubted her. Instead, Danielle's voice remained measured, almost gentle. That made the silence in the room harder to escape. Grant finally spoke. "Why did you come here alone?" Danielle looked at him. "Because I wanted to see how this company treated someone when they believed she had no power." The words settled over the table. Victor shifted in his chair. Erin lowered her eyes. Grant's face hardened, but he could not deny what everyone had witnessed. "You are making this personal," he said. Danielle's expression did not change. "You made it personal when you decided I did not belong here." She looked around the room, letting her gaze rest on each executive. "I arrived with a scheduled appointment. I was cleared by the corporate secretary. I asked for 5 minutes. Instead of checking the facts, you called security. Instead of asking why I was here, you assumed I was a disruption." No one interrupted her. Maya looked at Danielle with growing admiration. She remembered every time she had watched senior leaders dismiss a junior employee, every time a concern had been labeled difficult because it came from someone without enough status to be heard. Danielle rested both hands on the back of the chair at the head of the table. "This acquisition was not only about financial performance," she said. "It was about the culture behind the numbers. A company can report strong earnings and still fail the people inside it." Grant looked toward the windows, where the city stretched beneath them. "What happens now?" Danielle met his eyes. "Now we find out whether this company is willing to become better than the people who have been allowed to define it." Then she pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down, while every person in the room understood that the meeting had finally begun. Danielle sat at the head of the table, and for several seconds no one knew what to do with their hands. Tablets remained open. Coffee cooled beside legal pads. The city outside the windows kept moving as if nothing had happened, but inside Holloway Industries, every familiar rule had shifted. Grant Holloway remained standing near his former seat, his shoulders stiff, his face caught between anger and disbelief. Victor Hale looked from Danielle to the board members, searching for someone willing to say the acquisition could not be real. No one did. Danielle opened the first folder in front of her. "Before we discuss financial strategy," she said, "we need to discuss what happened in this room." Grant gave a sharp exhale. "You have made your point." Danielle looked at him. "No, Mr. Holloway. I have established a fact. The point comes next." Her voice was calm, but it carried through the room with the certainty of a legal ruling. "I was cleared to attend this meeting. I arrived with documents relevant to the company's ownership. I asked for 5 minutes. You ordered security to remove me before you verified a single detail." Grant folded his arms. "I acted on the information available to me." "You acted on an assumption," Danielle said. "There is a difference." Maya Thompson sat quietly near the back wall, but Danielle noticed her. "Ms. Thompson," she said, "you recognized the meeting notice, did you not?" Maya looked startled. Every executive turned toward her. "Yes," she said. "I saw the confidential calendar entry. It listed Brooks Equity Partners, outside counsel, and the corporate secretary." "And did you attempt to raise that information?" Danielle asked. Maya swallowed. "Yes. I tried." Victor leaned forward. "She made a vague comment about the calendar. There was no reason to derail the meeting over it." Danielle looked at him. "A junior employee tried to provide relevant facts, and you decided she was not worth hearing." Victor's face tightened. "That is not what happened." "It is exactly what happened," Maya said. The words surprised even her. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her eyes on Victor. "I said there was a closing notice. You told me not to insert myself into an executive matter." The room went quiet again. Grant looked at Victor, and Victor looked away. Danielle closed the folder in front of her. "This is why culture matters," she said. "People do not stop speaking because they have nothing to say. They stop speaking because they learn what happens when they do." Leonard Price nodded slowly. "What are you proposing?" Danielle turned toward the board. "Effective immediately, I am requesting an independent review of executive conduct, workplace reporting practices, and promotion decisions. I want the review to include every complaint involving discrimination, retaliation, or unequal treatment from the past 3 years. Grant's jaw tightened. You cannot dismantle the leadership team over one misunderstanding. Danielle met his gaze. I am not dismantling anything over one misunderstanding. I am examining whether this misunderstanding was possible because too many people have been taught that power excuses disrespect. She looked toward Maya. Ms. Thompson, your statement will be protected. No one in this company will retaliate against you for telling the truth. Maya nodded, her eyes bright with relief. Danielle then turned back to Grant and Victor. Until the review is complete, both of you will step away from operational decisions. Grant stared at her. You are suspending me? Danielle's expression remained composed. I am protecting the integrity of the review. There is a difference. Grant Holloway did not sit down. He stood beside the conference table with both hands clenched at his sides, staring at Danielle as if her words had changed the shape of the room around him. You cannot remove me from operations based on a single morning, he said. Danielle looked at the board members, then back at him. I am not removing you based on a single morning. I am placing you on administrative leave while an independent review determines whether this morning was an exception or evidence of a larger pattern. Victor Hale pushed his chair back. This is outrageous. We built this company. Danielle's eyes settled on him. Then you should understand that a company is more than its quarterly reports. It is every person who walks through its doors and learns whether they will be heard. Victor gave a bitter smile. You came in here looking for a reason to take control. I came in here because I had already taken responsibility, Danielle said. The question is whether you are willing to take responsibility for what you created. Leonard Price opened a message from the corporate secretary and read it silently. Then he cleared his throat. The resolution is ready. It places Mr. Holloway and Mr. Hale on temporary administrative leave, preserves all executive communications, and appoints an outside firm to begin a culture and governance review. Grant looked at the board. You are going to let her do this? Leonard met his eyes. The voting authority is clear. And what happened today was witnessed by everyone in this room. Grant looked toward Erin Wallace near the door. Erin had spent years greeting executives, scheduling meetings, and making herself small whenever powerful people spoke sharply. Now she stood straighter than before. Grant turned toward Maya. And you are going to support this? Maya's face tightened, but she did not look away. I am going to tell the truth. The words landed with a force that did not need volume. Danielle watched Maya for a moment, then nodded. That is all anyone should have to do. She picked up her phone and called her chief of staff, Jordan Ellis. Jordan answered immediately. Ms. Brooks, the closing announcement is ready for release. Danielle looked around the table. Send it to every employee. Include the new reporting protections, the independent review, and the temporary leadership structure. Make it clear that no employee will face retaliation for participating. Understood, Jordan said. Danielle ended the call. A moment later, phones began to vibrate across the room. The notice was moving through the company, floor by floor, department by department. On the screens of employees who had never met Danielle, a new message appeared. Holloway Industries had entered a new chapter under Brooks Equity Partners. Grant watched the executives read it. His anger had nowhere left to go. What do you want from me? He asked. Danielle did not answer immediately. She remembered her mother sitting across from a bank manager years earlier, explaining a small business loan application, while the man kept looking past her toward the white customers in line. Her mother had left that office with her shoulders straight, but Danielle had seen the hurt she tried to hide. That day, Danielle learned that dignity was not something people gave you. It was something you carried until the world learned to recognize it. I want you to understand something, Danielle said. You did not need to know I owned this company to know I deserved respect. You did not need my title to read my appointment, hear my words, or treat me fairly. Grant lowered his eyes. Danielle stood from the chair at the head of the table. The review begins now. What happens next will depend on what the truth reveals. The meeting did not end when Danielle stood. It changed shape. The board members remained in their seats, reading the resolution that had just been sent to their devices. Grant Holloway and Victor Hale stood near the windows, separated from the table by only a few feet but suddenly far from the authority they had carried into the room. Outside, Chicago's morning traffic moved below them in thin lines of light and steel. Inside, the only sound was the quiet tapping of fingers against glass screens. Danielle looked toward Aaron Wallace. "Please ask the corporate secretary and outside counsel to join us." Aaron nodded immediately. Her voice was steadier when she spoke into the intercom. "They are on their way." It was a small moment, but Maya noticed it. Earlier that morning, Aaron had been afraid to confirm a visitor list. Now she was giving instructions in a room where no one could dismiss her as invisible. Danielle gathered the closing documents into a neat stack. "The review will begin with facts," she said. "Not rumors. Not excuses. Facts." Leonard Price nodded. "What will the outside firm examine first?" Danielle looked toward the executive offices beyond the glass wall. "Hiring, promotion, compensation, reporting channels, disciplinary records, and every complaint that was labeled difficult, disruptive, or unsupported without a proper investigation." Victor gave a tired laugh. "You are going to turn this place upside down." Danielle met his eyes. "If fairness feels upside down, then the old structure was built wrong." Grant remained silent for a long moment. Then he looked at the board. "I made a mistake this morning." Danielle waited. "I should have checked the calendar," he continued. "I should have asked why she was here." His voice sounded different now, stripped of the certainty that had filled the room earlier. Danielle did not interrupt him. Grant looked at her. "I am sorry." The apology remained between them. It was not enough to erase what had happened, and Danielle did not pretend that it was. "Acknowledging a mistake is necessary," she said. "But it is not the same as understanding it." Grant's eyes narrowed slightly. "What else is there to understand?" Danielle took a slow breath. "You did not question me because I lacked information. You questioned me because you saw a black woman in a space you believed belonged to someone else. You saw my clothes, my briefcase, my face, and you made a decision before you read one document." No one looked away from her now. "That decision did not begin this morning," Danielle continued. "It came from a culture where some people are expected to prove they belong while others are assumed to belong." Maya felt the words settle deep inside her. She thought of meetings where she had prepared more than anyone else and still been asked to take notes. She thought of ideas that became important only after a senior man repeated them. She had never called it a pattern out loud. Not until now. The corporate secretary entered with outside counsel, both carrying folders and serious expressions. Danielle gestured toward the empty seats. "Please begin preserving all relevant records," she said, "and establish a confidential process for employee interviews." Outside counsel nodded. "It will be done." Danielle turned toward Maya. "Ms. Thompson, I would like you to assist the review team as a protected liaison for junior legal staff, if you are willing." Maya looked stunned. "Me? You saw what others ignored," Danielle said. "That perspective has value." Maya nodded slowly. "I am willing." Danielle gave her a small smile. Then she looked around the room one final time. "Today is not about replacing one person's power with another's. It is about building a company where no one has to wait for a title before they are treated with respect." By noon, the news had traveled farther than the 38th floor. It moved through break rooms, elevators, team chats, and quiet conversations behind closed office doors. Employees who had spent years learning when not to speak began reading the company-wide message again and again. An independent review. Protected reporting. New leadership. For some, it sounded like corporate language. For others, it sounded like the first crack of light beneath a door that had been shut for too long. Danielle remained in the boardroom with the corporate secretary, outside counsel, and a smaller group of directors. Grant Holloway and Victor Hale had been asked to leave the executive floor while the review began. Their access to internal systems had been paused, not as punishment, Danielle explained, but to preserve the integrity of the process. Still, when the elevator doors closed behind them, the room seemed to exhale. Maya Thompson sat beside Danielle with a fresh legal pad in front of her. She had been offered a protected role in the review, but the responsibility felt heavier than the title. "What if no one talks?" Maya asked quietly. Danielle looked at the rows of empty chairs around the table. "People will talk when they believe the truth will not be used against them. And if they do not believe that?" Maya asked. Danielle's expression softened. "Then we earn their trust slowly. We do not demand it." The corporate secretary entered a note into the meeting record. Outside counsel reviewed the first preservation order. Every executive email, calendar entry, complaint file, performance review, and human resources escalation connected to the investigation would be retained. No files would disappear. No stories would be rewritten after the fact. Danielle knew that was where accountability began. Not in dramatic speeches. In records. In names. In the willingness to look at what people had been trained to overlook. A knock came at the glass door. Erin Wallace stood outside with a middle-aged man in a maintenance uniform. She looked uncertain, but she opened the door when Danielle nodded. "Ms. Brooks," Erin said, "this is Samuel Ortiz." He asked if he could speak with someone from the review team. Samuel held his cap in both hands. "I do not want trouble," he said. "I have worked here 19 years. Danielle stood and walked around the table, stopping a respectful distance from him. "You are not in trouble," she said. "You are welcome here." Samuel looked at Maya, then at the attorneys, then back at Danielle. "I have seen people complain before," he said. "Nothing changed. Some of them got transferred. Some just stopped coming around." Danielle nodded. "That is why the process is independent. You can speak confidentially. You can have representation if you want it. And retaliation will be investigated." Samuel studied her face, searching for the promise behind the words. "You really mean that?" Danielle did not rush to answer. "I mean that a company cannot call itself strong if its employees are afraid to tell the truth." Samuel lowered his eyes for a moment. Then he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. It contained dates, names, and incidents he had written down over years because he had not known where else to put them. Maya looked at the paper, then at Danielle. The story was becoming larger than one boardroom, larger than one insult, larger than one executive's mistake. Danielle accepted the paper carefully. "Thank you for trusting us with this," she said. Samuel nodded, and for the first time, his shoulders loosened. As he left, Maya looked at Danielle with a new understanding. "This is what you meant," she said. Danielle placed the paper inside the review file. "Yes," she replied. "Respect is not proven by how you treat the people who can change your title. It is proven by how you treat the people you think no one will listen to." The folded sheet Samuel Ortiz had carried in his pocket became the first of many. By late afternoon, the review team had received messages from employees on every floor. Some wrote only a few sentences. Some sent screenshots, calendar invitations, and notes they had saved for years. Others asked whether they could speak without their names appearing in the final report. Danielle made the same answer clear each time. "You control your story," she told them. "Our job is to protect the truth, not expose people who are trying to survive." Maya Thompson sat across from her in a temporary review office that had once belonged to an executive vice president. The desk was large, the windows overlooked the river, and the shelves were lined with awards from years of strong earnings. Yet the room felt different now. The awards no longer seemed impressive. They looked like reminders of how easily a company could celebrate success while ignoring the people carrying its weight. Maya scrolled through a growing list of confidential interviews. "There are patterns," she said. "Employees being passed over after reporting concerns. Complaints marked resolved without interviews. Managers using words like difficult or not a culture fit." Danielle nodded. Patterns are what people call isolated incidents when they do not want to see the whole picture. A message appeared on Danielle's phone. It was from Jordan Ellis, her chief of staff. The independent firm had completed its first review of the executive communications archive. Several messages had been flagged for further investigation, including emails involving Grant Holloway and Victor Hale. Danielle read the summary without changing her expression. Maya watched her closely. "Is it bad?" she asked. Danielle set the phone down. "It is serious." "What happens to them?" Maya asked. Danielle looked through the window at the city below. "That depends on evidence, process, and the board. Accountability has to be fair, even when the truth is painful." Maya nodded slowly. She had expected Danielle to want immediate punishment. Instead, she saw something more difficult. A woman who had been humiliated in public was refusing to become careless with power in private. A knock sounded at the door. Aaron Wallace entered with 2 coffees and a nervous smile. "I thought you both might need these," she said. Maya accepted one, surprised. "Thank you." Aaron hesitated. "I also wanted to say something. This morning, when Ms. Brooks asked if she was on the visitor list, I knew she was. I was scared to say it." Danielle looked at her. "You told the truth when it mattered." Aaron shook her head. "Only after he asked me directly. Courage is not always instant," Danielle said. "Sometimes it is choosing differently the next time." Aaron's eyes filled with relief. She placed the other coffee near Danielle and turned to leave, but Danielle stopped her gently. "Aaron, would you be willing to share what you have seen from the front desk? The way visitors are treated. Who gets questioned? Who gets waved through?" Aaron looked down at her hands. Then she nodded. "Yes. I would." After she left, Maya looked at Danielle. "You keep giving people a chance to be part of the change." Danielle opened Samuel's handwritten notes again. "That is the only kind of change that lasts," she said. "One person cannot rebuild a culture alone." As the sun lowered behind the Chicago skyline, the interview list continued to grow. And somewhere else in the building, Grant Holloway sat in an office without access to his company systems, finally facing the silence he had spent years creating. By the next morning, the temporary review office had become the busiest room in the building. The hallway outside was lined with employees waiting for confidential interviews, each carrying a different version of the same question. Would anyone finally listen? Danielle Brooks arrived before 8 o'clock with Jordan Ellis and the outside review team. She wore the same calm expression she had carried into the boardroom the day before, but the stack of files on the conference table had grown twice as high. Maya Thompson stood near the window, reading the preliminary findings with both hands around a cup of coffee. "They found 12 complaints that were closed without a full investigation," she said, "and 4 promotion decisions that were changed after employees reported concerns." Danielle took the report from her and read the summary in silence. The names were different. The departments were different. But the language repeated itself. Not a culture fit. Difficult communication style. Insufficient leadership presence. Words that sounded neutral until people looked at who they were used against. "Schedule interviews with the managers who signed off on these decisions," Danielle said. "And notify the board that the review is expanding." Jordan nodded and made a note. At the far end of the floor, Grant Holloway sat alone in a small conference room assigned for his administrative leave. His former office remained locked while the records team preserved its files. He had spent the night reading the company announcement on his personal phone, watching messages arrive from people who had once returned his calls before the first ring ended. Most of them said nothing now. The silence felt unfamiliar. It was not the respectful silence he had expected in meetings. It was the silence of people deciding whether he deserved their loyalty. A knock came at his door. Grant looked up, expecting an attorney. Instead, he saw Maya standing in the hallway. She hesitated before entering. "I was told I could speak with you," she said. Grant sat back in his chair. "Why would you want to?" Maya held a folder against her chest. "Because I have to give my statement." And because you asked me yesterday if I was going to support this. Grant looked away. I remember. Maya took a breath. I am not supporting a person. I am supporting the truth. Grant said nothing. Maya continued. You built a company where people learned to watch who was in the room before they spoke. Mr. Hale told me not to insert myself. You did not correct him. Yesterday, you did not even look at the calendar before you decided Ms. Brooks did not belong. Grant's face tightened. I said I was sorry. I know, Maya replied. But an apology is not the same as listening. The words stayed with him after she left. Across the floor, Danielle met with the board by secure video call. Leonard Price appeared on the screen beside the other directors. The findings are concerning, he said. What are you recommending? Danielle looked at the faces on the screen. Immediate safeguards. Independent oversight for hiring and promotion decisions. A protected reporting office that answers directly to the board. Mandatory review of every closed complaint from the last 3 years. And no executive bonuses until the review is complete. One director frowned. That will be disruptive. Danielle's voice remained even. So was allowing people to be ignored. The board fell quiet. Then Leonard nodded. Prepare the resolution. Danielle ended the call and looked toward the hallway, where employees still waited to be heard. The company had not changed because ownership changed hands. It was changing because people were finally being asked to tell the truth, and this time, someone had decided the truth would have consequences. The board resolution passed before noon. Every director voted in favor of the expanded safeguards, the independent oversight, and the pause on executive bonuses. The announcement went out across Holloway Industries with language that was careful, formal, and impossible to ignore. Closed complaints would be reopened. Hiring and promotion decisions would be audited. A protected reporting office would answer directly to the board. For the first time in years, employees saw their concerns described not as distractions from the company's mission, but as part of the company's responsibility. Danielle stood in the temporary review office reading the final notice before it was released. Jordan Ellis waited beside her with a tablet. The board wants to know whether you will address the company this afternoon, Jordan said. Danielle looked through the glass wall at the employees moving through the hallway. Some walked quickly, pretending not to watch. Others paused near the door, reading the message on their phones. Yes, Danielle said. But not from the executive stage. An hour later, chairs were arranged in the main atrium on the first floor. The space had been built to impress visitors, with polished stone floors, tall windows, and a giant metal sculpture rising toward the ceiling. For years, executives had used it for product launches and quarterly celebrations. That afternoon, it was filled with employees from every department. Maya stood near the front with Aaron and Samuel Ortiz. They had not planned to sit together, but somehow they had found one another in the crowd. Grant Holloway and Victor Hale were not there. Their leave remained in effect, and the review was still ongoing. Danielle walked to a simple microphone at the center of the atrium. She wore the same navy suit she had worn when Grant ordered her out of the boardroom. The same briefcase rested at her feet. She did not stand behind a podium. She stood where everyone could see her. Yesterday morning, she began. I entered this building for a meeting I was authorized to attend. Before anyone asked why I was here, I was told to leave. The atrium became completely still. Some people may believe this story matters because I had the power to change what happened next, Danielle continued. But that is not why it matters. It matters because no one should need power, wealth, or a title to be treated with respect. Maya felt her throat tighten. Samuel looked down at his hands. Aaron stood straighter beside them. Danielle's voice remained steady. This company will not become better because one person was embarrassed. It will become better only if we are honest about the habits that allowed people to be dismissed, ignored, or punished for speaking. She looked across the crowd. The review is not a search for scapegoats. It is a commitment to facts, accountability, and change. If you have a story, you will be heard. If you need protection, you will have it. If you have been silent because you believed no one would listen, that silence will no longer be treated as consent. A quiet ripple moved through the atrium. Then Samuel stood. He did not say anything at first. He simply began to clap. Maya joined him. Aaron joined them. Soon the sound spread through the room, not as celebration, but as recognition. Danielle lifted one hand, and the applause softened. "We have work to do," she said. "Real work. The kind that happens after the meeting ends." Then she stepped away from the microphone and walked into the crowd, not toward the elevators reserved for executives, but toward the employees who had waited years for someone to meet them where they stood. After the atrium emptied, Danielle did not return to the executive floor. She walked with Maya, Aaron, and Samuel through the main lobby, past the reception desk where visitors checked in beneath the company logo. The desk looked ordinary now. A polished counter. Visitor badges. A security gate that opened with a quiet click. But Danielle knew ordinary places were often where people learned whether they mattered. Aaron paused behind the desk and looked at the visitor list on her screen. "I used to think my job was just checking names," she said. Danielle looked at her. "It is. But it is also making sure people are treated fairly while you do it." Aaron nodded slowly. "I want to do better." "Then help build a process that does better," Danielle said. By the end of the week, the first changes were already visible. The new reporting office opened on the second floor, separate from human resources and connected directly to the board committee overseeing the review. Employees could submit concerns anonymously, request confidential meetings, and receive written updates about how their reports were handled. Maya helped review the language on every form, removing phrases that sounded protective but made people feel afraid to speak. Samuel joined a small employee advisory group with workers from maintenance, customer service, finance, and operations. Aaron helped create a visitor protocol that required staff to verify appointments before making assumptions about anyone entering the building. None of it was dramatic from the outside. No headlines. No grand ceremony. Just systems changing one decision at a time. Late Friday afternoon, Danielle returned to the boardroom on the 38th floor. The long walnut table was empty except for one folder waiting in front of her chair. It contained the first preliminary report from the independent firm. The findings confirmed patterns in the company that could not be explained away as isolated mistakes. Complaints had been dismissed too quickly. Employees had been overlooked after raising concerns. Managers had used vague language to protect decisions that deserved scrutiny. Danielle read every page in silence. Jordan Ellis stood near the window. "The board is ready to meet whenever you are," Jordan said. Danielle closed the folder. "Not yet. First, I want Grant Holloway and Victor Hale to receive the same report everyone else will receive." Jordan looked surprised. "You want them in the meeting?" "They deserve due process," Danielle said. "Accountability cannot mean abandoning fairness when it becomes inconvenient." An hour later, Grant and Victor entered the boardroom under the terms of their administrative leave. They looked different from the men who had stood there days earlier. Grant no longer carried the sharp confidence that had filled his voice when he ordered Danielle out. Victor avoided looking at the chair at the head of the table. Danielle waited until they were seated. "The review has found serious concerns," she said. "You will have the opportunity to respond through counsel. The board will make its decisions based on evidence." Grant looked at her. "Why are you being fair to us?" Danielle held his gaze. "Because fairness is not something I use only when it benefits me." The room fell quiet. Danielle opened the report again. "This company has a chance to become worthy of the people who keep it running. That chance begins with truth, not excuses." Outside the windows, the sun lowered over Chicago, turning the glass towers gold. Inside, no one could change what had happened. But for the first time, they could choose what happened next. 3 weeks later, the board gathered again in the same room where Danielle Brooks had first been told she did not belong. The long walnut table was unchanged. The windows still looked over Chicago. The chairs still reflected the soft morning light. But the people sitting in them had changed. Maya Thompson now sat beside the independent review team as a protected liaison for junior staff. Aaron Wallace attended as part of the new Visitor and Workplace Access Committee. Samuel Ortiz sat with the Employee Advisory Group, his hands folded over a folder filled with recommendations gathered from workers across the company. At the head of the table, Danielle read the final report in silence before setting it down. The findings were clear. Holloway Industries had allowed patterns of unequal treatment to go unchallenged. Complaints had been minimized. Employees had been discouraged from speaking. Promotion decisions had been shaped by standards that were not applied equally to everyone. The report also found that Grant Holloway and Victor Hale had failed to act when concerns were raised, and that their conduct had contributed to a culture where fear was easier than honesty. Grant sat across from Danielle with his attorney beside him. He looked older than he had 3 weeks earlier. Victor sat beside him, staring at the report without turning the page. Danielle looked around the room. The board has reviewed the findings, the employee statements, and the responses provided through counsel, she said. Effective today, Grant Holloway and Victor Hale will no longer hold leadership roles at Holloway Industries. No one celebrated. No one needed to. The decision was not a victory lap. It was a consequence. Grant looked at Danielle for a long moment. "I thought you came here to take my company," he said quietly. Danielle met his eyes. "I came here because I believed this company could be better than the people who had been allowed to make others feel small." Grant lowered his gaze. "I was wrong about you." Danielle's voice remained calm. "You were wrong before you knew anything about me. That is what has to change." After the meeting, Danielle walked through the lobby without an assistant, without cameras, and without anyone announcing her title. At the reception desk, Aaron greeted a visitor in a worn coat carrying a plain folder. She checked the appointment, smiled, and said, "Welcome. They are expecting you." The visitor relaxed immediately. Danielle noticed, but she did not interrupt. Across the lobby, Samuel spoke with a new employee advisory group. Maya stood near the elevator, reviewing a draft policy with 2 junior attorneys who no longer seemed afraid to ask questions. The company was still a business. It still had deadlines, budgets, clients, and difficult decisions ahead. But it had begun to understand something its old leadership had forgotten. Culture was not written in a handbook. It was written in the smallest moments, in who was believed, who was interrupted, who was welcomed, and who was told to leave. Danielle paused near the glass doors and looked back at the building. She had walked into it as a black woman carrying a briefcase, and someone had decided that was enough to dismiss her. They had not known she had bought the company that morning. But they should never have needed to know. Respect was not a reward for power. It was the minimum owed to every person who walked through the door.